So everyone, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. Apologies for keeping you in the waiting room for so long. We're just about 5 minutes away from the official beginning of the event. And if we just hold on for 5 minutes, but to introduce ourselves a little bit, this is Ying Matheson, our chief publisher.
Hello, everybody.
And we have Francis Waitman from the Leeds Center for New Chinese Writing.
Hi, everyone.
We have 严格老师，严格老师，您能说一下 hi 吗？
大家好。
Sorry， 李娟老师。
大家好。
And then we have Christopher Payne joining us from Toronto, I believe.
Hello.
He's the translator for Li Juan. And then Jeremy, who's in New York, I believe, right?
Yes.
Jeremy, you're in New York at the moment, right?
Yes.
Brilliant. For 1 p.m. to UK time to begin this event fully. We're still letting people in at the moment. And we'll ask if people have questions for the speakers. We'll ask you to pop it into the chat function of Zoom, and then basically at the end we'll have about a 20-minute Q&A section, which we'll answer. We'll go through and start answering some of those questions, moderated by Francis at the Leeds Center of New Chinese Writing.
And of course, as one of the participants, welcome to everybody that's here. This is wonderful. Whenever we organize events like this, we're always terrified that there'll be more organizers than actual audience. So this is absolutely fantastic. We're so happy to have so many people here. So
Yeah.
welcome.
Right.
It's wonderful to, well, I would say see everyone, but it's great that you're all here. So thanks for coming.
Cool. So
Okay, let's start.
Right. We have 109 people in the room at the moment, 110 now. And let's begin. So welcome to Women Writing China. We're very happy to be hosting this event together with the Leeds Center of New Chinese Writing with Dr. Francis Waitman and Tilted Axis Press. Therese and Sona, if you're in here, please send me an email or something. And then, so yeah, we thought we'd go through and kind of introduce all the speakers involved first. So to introduce the Leeds Center, Francis.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm not on mute.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, just to very quick hello from Leeds. We're delighted to be hosting this event. We at the Leeds Center for New Chinese Writing, we're interested in promoting all kinds of contemporary Chinese writing, contemporary Chinese literature, just trying to show what range there is of exciting writing which is coming out from China now in English translation. You can look at our website for lots more information. I'm going to keep it short because there's other people who are more interesting than me to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. And to introduce us, we are Sinos Books. We're a small press based in the south of England, basically. And we specialize in the translation and publishing of some of the best, what we consider to be the best writing in China. And we like to think that there's a lot of potential there, basically. But
let's hope so. Yes.
Exactly. And up first we have Li Juan, who was born in 1979 in Kuntung City, Xinjiang. Li Juan spent her formative years shuttling back and forth between Xinjiang and Sichuan as her parents were members of the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps. Some of her time growing up was also spent among the herdsmen of Altai, and her experiences with them have inspired much of her work. In 1999, her first collection of essays, titled 9 Shapes of Snow, was published. This was followed by several more short essay anthologies such as My Altai, A Small Corner of Altai, Songs of the Nighttime Road, and One Thing Remembered, Three Things Forgotten, as well as longer collections like Distant Sunflower Fields, Winter Pastures, and The Herd's Path. The latter three form a trilogy on northern Xinjiang. Her works have been translated into several different languages, notably French, Korean, Arabic. Distant Sunflower Fields is the first to be published in English.
You know.
李江老师，您能说一下 hi 吗？
你把它 Yeah, so this is Li Juan 老师. Yeah, just sort of like let everybody see, can see her. She's traveling at the moment, so she's in her hotel room.
So up next we have Yang Ge 老师，杨老师，您听见吗？
Yes， 听得见。
If you could just run through some of your, just a quick introduction about yourself, if possible.
Oh no, am I supposed to do it?
Oh, sorry,
Francis, can you save me?
Francis, apologies.
Yang Ge is, well, you see, if I introduce Yang Ge, I will be talking all about what a great friend she is of our centre. So that's probably not fair. But Yang Ge is a very well-known Chinese author, and she has recently also been described repeatedly as an Irish author as well. So she is one of the few authors around who writes in both Chinese and in English. And for those of you who've had the opportunity to read the Strange Feasts of China, translated by Jeremy, I'm sure that you'll be very much looking forward to what she has to say today.
Brilliant. And then up next we have Christopher. Christopher, you could just say hi real quick. Just so
Hello.
everyone knows. Hi, hello. So Christopher is the current, I believe, associate chair of Chinese to English translation at the University of Toronto, I believe.
Yes, English and Chinese translation program that we have
Nice.
at University of Toronto.
So just to give you a bit of idea of Christopher's background, Christopher has co-translated the award-winning Decoded and In the Dark by Mai Jia, along with his frequent collaborator, Olivia Milburn. He's brought Jiang Zilong's magnum opus, Empires of Dust, to an English-speaking audience. Christopher Payne holds a PhD in Chinese literature from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. And he has spent more than a decade teaching at post-secondary institutions, most notably the Seongguk Hwang University in Seoul, South Korea.
Seongguk.
Apologies.
All my Korean listeners would be like, where was that?
And the University of Manchester? Where is that? In the
I don't
UK.
know that one.
In 2002, he took up a position at the University of Toronto, where he has continued to champion Chinese literature in the English-speaking world.
That was 2020, not 2002, unless I.
Oh, apologies,
traveled back.
2020. my head. And up next, we have Jeremy. Jeremy,
everyone.
do you mind doing a quick intro on yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am a novelist, playwright, and translator from Chinese. I am based in New York, and my most recent translation is Yan Ge's 一手指 Strange Beasts of China, which we will be talking about today.
Li Jian 老师 writing on the uniqueness of writing from the fringes of China. Because of time constraints, we've asked her to pre-record a video, which we've subtitled, and we'll play that for you right now.
We just need a buzzer, right? Then it'll be like a real game show.
Just admiring everybody's lockdown haircut. We'll have like a vote for the best hair maybe afterwards.
Oh, it's definitely Jeremy.
Can everyone see the video?
Yeah. Can everyone see the video now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Brilliant.
great. So
So-
let's get the.
大家好，我是来自中国新疆的作者李娟，很高兴能够在这里和大家一起做文学方面的探讨。出版方希望我谈论一下关于在中国文化边缘的西部文化背景的创作独特性的话题。由于我不擅长演讲，就提前写了一份演讲稿，照着读。说到独特，如果说我的写作会被读者和评论家认为独特的话，我第一反应，会觉得应该是指创作题材方面的独特。我的文字大多是以我生活的地方为背景，荒野深处的贫瘠闭塞的村庄，古老的艰辛的游牧生产方式，少数民族的文化传统以及所面临的外部文化冲击，这些我所熟知的一切，对于 外面世界的人们来说是遥远陌生而富于魅力的。但是再想想，可能也并不只是这样。我生活写作的地方虽然偏远，从这里传向世界的声音也非常微小，但是为它发声的写作者也有不少。介绍这片大地和人群的文字也堆积如山。比起我来，他们中相当一部分可能更热衷于强调独特这种东西，他们更急于猎奇。我不认为这是正常的创作，也不觉得这种创作对于边缘写作群体有代表意义。因此，要谈论独特，应该从写作者本身谈起，从他的态度、他的事业、他的身份，诸如此类。这种探索对我来说异常艰巨，只好把这个话题的范围缩小，只聊一下我们新疆近年来的本土创作这一块。首先谈一下我自己的写作。有一个已经过世的前辈，在很多年前对我有一个评论，大意是：李娟的作品有着明亮而非阴暗的底色，关于寂寞的诗有很多，而明亮爽朗之中的无边的寂寞似乎还没有人写过，这应该是一个独创的境界。这个评论令当时的我好像重新认识了一遍寂寞这个东西，并且重新认识了一遍自己。我记得当时自己想写的并不是寂寞，而是一段和陌生人短暂相处的经历。那段经历对于年轻时的我有深刻的触动，却不明所以，也不知道写出来意义何在，却敏锐地捕捉了其中的美好与激情，欲罢不能。真的，我在写的时候并不知道我写的是什么，直到被读者指出你写的是寂寞。这篇文章名字叫做看我拉面的男人。这篇文章写于将近快20年了。我最初写作就是这样懵然而混沌，凭借一点点表达天分，在文字世界里横冲直撞。但是运气很好，获得了许多前辈和读者的认同，才得以持续成长和改变。是的，是改变。我觉得我正是通过不断的改变，才渐渐成为现在的自己。通过不断的否定自己，克服自己。永不改变是勇气和能力的体现，但是勇于改变同样也来自可贵的勇气和能力，还有自信。我有许多不自信的地方，但这方面实在是很自信。还有很多读者认为我的写作非常节制，认为我的视野是向外部敞开的，少有自我痕迹，比如说少有性别痕迹，总是会令一些人阅读时忽略我的女性身份。可事实上，目前为止，我的所有文字都是围绕我的个人经历展开，并且只与个人观察、个人思考有关。如此个人化的写作却带给读者相反的感受，只能解释为性格方面的原因。是我的性格让我不愿过多的暴露自己，可能也觉得自己大多数的时候实在不值一提吧。以上是我 自己对自己写作特点的一些判断，总结起来大致就是敞亮、开放、节制。然后再谈到我们新疆的作家群体，我觉得我们这里能够被广泛认可的作者都有一个共同特点，文字擅长以小见大，他们很少寄托大事件、大视野而创作。相当一部分作者都热衷于炮制独特，强调差异的时候，他们却更专注于相同。此地的人们与世界上任何一个角落的人都相同的那一部分，相同的欢乐，相同的痛苦，相同的希望。这些讲述者们赋予耐心和希望，心态积极而宽容。同样，在他们笔下，哪怕是寂寞，也处于无边的明朗，也处于在无边的明亮爽朗之中。所以这种寂寞并不是我的独创，而是西部作家文字中的普遍存在。新疆的哈萨克女作家叶尔克西，她的作品和她本人一样敏感又温和。她以女性特有的柔弱与固执，关怀本民族的命运转折。新疆作家周涛，语言华美而从容，他总是能将种种纠结复杂的人的情感处理得通透而诗意。还有新疆作家刘亮程，他以对各种平凡事物的描写打动读者。他总是从一只虫子、一株草写起，在最细微的角落里处理最强烈的感知。还有新疆作家董立博，他的魅力在于文字中对所有普通人的体谅和关怀。像开始所说的那样，为这样一个作家群体的创作特点溯源是个巨大的课题。但是我还是觉得归结于地域原因这个方向是没错的。于是又说回了最开始的判断，除去地域对创作内容的影响，更深刻的影响在于他对作者本人。也许大概率下，面对什么样的世界，就会成为什么样的人。开阔、空旷、毫无遮蔽的生存场所，令世世代代生活在这里的人们敬畏天地和强者，接受自己的平凡，不愿过度沉湎自我情绪，而更关注外部世界，乐于歌颂与赞美。恶劣的气候、贫瘠的土地、艰辛的生活现实，令人们吐气无效的悲哀，而崇尚积极乐观的生活态度。地广人稀，令人们重视人口数量，依赖互助关系，易于信任陌生人，易于包容外来文化。而落后的交通、闭塞的信息通道，又令人们很难走出传统惯性。对于未来，心态矛盾，不安而又期待。中国有句老话，一方水土养一方人。从这样的人群中走出来的作家，也一定会打有相关烙印。这就是我的一个粗暴的总结，其实也算不上是什么独特的观点。谢谢大家。
Thank you very much for that. 谢谢阿姨。Right, up next we have a reading from Dr. Christopher Payne. Christopher, if I can hand off to you on this.
Sure. So thanks, Li Laoshi, Li Juan. It was great listening to your speech, and it's been a real honor actually translating your work. It's a great story. It's a great, the Distant Sunflower Fields is a really fascinating kind of tale of life out in these far off places. So it was a real a joy to translate. So I'm going to read chapter 6 from this. A lot of the chapters are small, so I know I have a few minutes. I'm going to try and read the entire chapter. It's only a couple of pages, but I thought, given the topic of today's kind of women writers in China and so on, that I would read chapter 6, which is simply titled Me. So I'm going to begin with that chapter. So here we go. I had another dream, this one about a life lived on the land. I had my own plot and a sturdy house built upon it. To speak of it now, well, it wasn't a life much different from what Mum had. And yet it wasn't wholly the same. It was at least a more stable life, less dependent on the vagaries of farming. It was a simpler life too, and I lived there for longer. The dream came and went. It was both with me and it wasn't. On more than one occasion, I'd made up my mind. I was going to search for my home in the village Mum was in. I even went so far as to draw up plans, my own blueprints, so to speak. Later, when I found myself in the town, this dream, the plans, they were still with me. Whenever I found myself racing back and forth, carrying out mundane bits of work, whenever I felt overly anxious and tired, or when my body just wouldn't let me sleep, I'd close my eyes, wrap my arms around my pillow, and there in the darkness, I'd continue formulating my grand schemes. I'd keep changing them too, thinking up different approaches, getting lost in minute details. And then, when I felt satisfied with what I'd thought up, a deep sleep would be my reward. I've been to many different places, and I've called more places home than I can remember. I've slept in more than my fair share of different beds too. But to me, this was always temporary. I guess it helps to explain why I've never been afraid of change, how I've never dreaded the way things do not remain the same. Life is just that, change, upheaval. At one point in time, I lived with my, I lived the life my granny did, excuse me. I had a small dog like Saihu, which is the dog that she introduces earlier on in Distant Sunflower Fields. I had a stable job and a regular salary. I was busy, but things were peaceful and calm. At that time, my large parcel of earth and the house I had on it were undergoing constant change, endless refurbishments, a new brick here, a new tile there, again and again, over and over. I've forever lacked a sense of tranquility. My heart worries too much, and I'm always anxious about this or that. As a result, I've had to learn to console myself that it's only temporary. It won't last forever. Your house will be finished one day. Just keep on, bear it. But deep down, I still know, I was leaving this place and I would move farther and farther away. When I was young, I lived on a military farm. Every house was identical, the same shape, the same layout, the same materials used to build them. The only difference was that in other households, red bricks were used for the floor, whereas ours had no flooring at all, just bare dirt. Ever since then, and this has stayed with me, I've always felt that the best possible flooring was red bricks. As for what made the best surface for walls, well, it didn't matter what kind of wallpaper was used or how the wall might be dressed up. No amount of silicone either. Nothing could compare to ivory limestone and the white patina it would give to the walls. This was the same for anyone who'd spent their youth looking at walls covered up and held up by old newspapers and too much paste. Limestone walls and red brick floors. That was my dream home. Simple, I suppose. Perhaps, but that simple dream has not become my reality. I doubt it ever will. Oh, and I'd need a small garden to grow vegetables. It could be just alongside one of the walls. Then, next to the garden, I'd want 2 trees. Finally, I'd have a chicken coop at the foot of the compound wall and a small flower bed somewhere nearby. But this, too, was only ever in my head. Why would I want a home like this? Would it give me a life of relative ease? No, that's not what was on my mind. That's not what I was thinking. No, in such a house, I could easily wait for, but it's not to be. All I feel at ease about is leaving and setting out on the next journey. And the next chapter, chapter 7, just begins with a great sentence that I wanted to end with, which says, I'm an expert at leaving, which I thought is an interesting way of finishing up my little reading from Distant Sunflower Fields.
That was
So
wonderful.
thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you.
And if you could just maybe elaborate a little bit more on like kind of the challenges you've had with the translation process of Distant Sunflower Fields, that'd be great as well.
Yeah, well, I guess the initial challenge was identifying some of the names of China's northwest area and kind of rendering those and figuring out where exactly it is. So I try and whenever I translate anything, I try to geographically orientate myself so I know which part of the country. I mean, I think that's what's wonderful about China is that there's such variety. You can go to so many different places and see and hear so many different stories. So that geographical location was important to orientate myself to that. So that was, I guess it's not really a challenge. It was more of a particular way that I approached the translation process. But it was, I also kind of, I had to bear this in mind. I mean, the topic of today's talk is women writers in China, but also this kind of on the outside or on the fringes and so on. And it struck me afterwards when this was the subject matter of the talk or of this presentation today, that interestingly, we've got two women writers, wonderful writers, great storytellers and so on. And yet we've got two translators that are men. So it kind of struck me when
three translators are men, actually.
And yeah, actually, because the translator of Li Juan's other book is also Jack, who's here listening as well. And it kind of made me think about the process of trying to identify a voice in the work that I'm translating. And it was interesting listening to Li Juan's speech when she actually brings up this issue, right, about how people identify her writing and how they understand her writing and whether or not there's a female perspective that's in the writing and whether or not it needs to be there. And I thought that this was all kind of, it dovetailed nicely into our topic for today, because I think that was a challenge for me, was, you know, being aware of that and thinking about that I am, you know, I don't claim to speak for them. The words that are on the page that are in my translation, they're entirely Li Juan's words. And that was really important for me, that I wanted her voice to come out in the translation. And I really do hope that I have it at least captured her voice. And I mean, she'll be the judge of that, and hopefully you will enjoy reading it. But that was something that was really, I guess, stuck with me. And you know, it's only kind of come, I guess, more to the fore after we had this, you know, the decision to make this our topic and so on. And I don't know if Jeremy wants to maybe join in now. I know he's not a translator of Li Juan, but it might be something that he might want to mention as well. And Jack, who's one of the other translators of Li Juan stuff, that, I mean, I'm not sure how you feel about this, but it was something that I thought we could maybe, you know, have opinions and share our points of view on this. I know that Jeremy is unmuted, so I don't know if he wants to jump in right away. I know this is mixing up our order, but I think it's a really important topic that you know, is worth discussing.
Yes, I loved when Li Juan said her early writing was chaotic and unruly, so let's make this event that too. I think
sorry, Daniel Ning.
As a translator, you're always taking on other identities anyway. So I think gender is just another thing that you navigate as you find your way into this other voice. And because I know Yen quite well, though I didn't know Yen when she was 21 and writing this book, I sort of had to project backwards from the person I knew to try to capture that voice, while sort of bringing it a bit towards her present voice. So for me, it was more of a time travel challenge, finding the voice in English. And because it takes place in largely a fictional world, in a way, you geographically oriented yourself with the real world that Li Juan was writing about.
Yes,
whereas I felt like the terrain I was getting to know was essentially Yen's inner psychic landscape from which this fantastical story arose.
Jack, do you want to say a few words? I mean, you're the translator of another of Li Juan's books. I know we're it's not on the table discussion today, but since you're here, it would be interesting to hear your point of view as well.
Okay, you've pulled me in just as I finished lunch, so that's good timing. I have a mouthful of food. I mean, finding the voice, you mentioned it being obviously my being a male translator and working on a woman's book. I mean, that never felt like much of a concern in terms of finding the voice. I suppose it was more finding the character of the voice as opposed to the gender of the voice. Like the humor and the tenderness and all of the various different characteristics within
vivid life. That's, I think, that Li Juan is great at portraying, that kind of the vividness to everything that's what I felt most when reading through it, and it really comes alive. I find that her literature does.
Yeah, fully agreed. So finding that was, I mean, it was a challenge at times. I think the first draft I did was I probably made Li Juan slightly goofier than, or much more goofier than she is, than you are, Li Juan, because I focused on the humor maybe more so than the tenderness. But then, you know, on further drafts, you can pull out extra other elements of it.
Right.
It was a process. It was fun.
Cool. Well, I mean, thanks guys for adding into that.
Christopher.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I just wanted to say, since Nikki is here and she's like the only woman translator and she's the other translator who's, so I thought maybe we should invite a woman to this discussion, to this
that was my next thing.
To this randomly occurred discussion, and to ask Nikki to have a bit input on.
That's exactly what I was going to do. I was going to pull Nikki in. I know that she's there, so that was my plan.
Oh, well, hello everyone. You put me on the spot. I wasn't really to say anything. But I mean, when I have a good book to translate from Chinese, it's a privilege whether it's a man or a woman.
Mm-hmm.
It's a special privilege if it's a woman, because I think that women writers are underrepresented in translation. I mean, we know they are. The statistics prove it. We've got this list on Paper Republic every year, and we know that the majority of translated writers are male. I love Li Juan's writing, I really do. And I find it hard to put a finger on why it's different from other stuff I've translated by male writers. I think whoever I'm translating, I have to really get inside their heads and hope that I can make their voice, recreate their voice. I mean, some of you, I think Christopher already said that. That can be very difficult when I'm translating a male writer with a male protagonist. It's quite difficult to produce this male voice. That's not to say it's easy if I'm translating a woman writer. It's just a rather different experience. It's kind of like whatever you do, it's a bit like being a ventriloquist. And that's part of the joy of translating. I think that's all I'm going to say for the moment.
No, I think that's great. I mean, thanks so much, Nikki. I'm sorry for dragging you in, but I guess Yango also encouraged me to drag you in, so for both of us. But I like that, the ventriloquist. I mean, I guess that's a great way of encapsulating that feeling that's there, because it's very much about trying to capture that other person's voice. And Li Juan Distant Sunflower Fields is fantastic. It's this great kind of adventure throughout this area of China that we don't, I mean, I guess, have the day-to-day lived reality of, that we don't know as well, and certainly are not as much exposed to. And that's what really kind of attracted me to the story that she tells in it. And it's this, you know, whether it's the two dogs that they have, her mom on her motorbike, you know, crossing over the land and stuff like that. And it's this great kind of encapsulation of a life lived. And that's really, I think, the joy that I got out of translating Li Juan's work. And certainly you make the point about underrepresentation of women writers, and that's true. And I think we're all kind of, I guess, in a certain sense, we're all kind of, you know, tied up with this question and this issue of representation. So I'm doubly happy that we've had the chance to bring two female writers here to talk about their work, to talk about the translations of their work, because I think this is an essential dialogue that we all need to have. So hopefully you'll all rush out and buy Li Juan's book and Yang Ge's book and enjoy the translations. And I think that's probably what I'm gonna end on that note, because I know we've got time constraints.
Indeed.
But I'm glad we were able to kind of bring in the other translators and so on to talk about their work and their experience. So I'm going to pass it on to Jeremy and Yang Ge, and thanks everyone for your attention.
Thank you so much for that, Christopher. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.
The next one.
I'm going to mute myself too, Daniel.
Sorry, what?
Oh, don't. What if we want you to answer some question during our session? Just please stand by and prepare to answer questions.
Okay, sounds good.
You're not allowed to relax.
Sounds good.
Keep everyone on their toes. Yes, it actually occurred to me during that discussion that the book I'm currently translating, which is by a male author, is extremely masculine, and the characters spend most of their time sitting on a rooftop playing cards and drinking beer and talking about women. And anyone who knows me knows that I would find that extremely difficult to find a voice for, which is indeed true. So perhaps the gender binary is a bit of a lie, which seems like a good moment to go on to the reading from Strange Beasts, which is appropriately enough a book about a women writer, specifically an amateur cryptozoologist in the fictional town of Yong'an, who meets and gets to know the mystical creatures that populate her city, and then writes about them. In this section from the chapter Flourishing Beasts, we're going to see how being a young woman writer can sometimes bring unwanted attention. She's meeting Zhongliang, the former protege of their professor, whom she has a love-hate relationship with. One day in March, Zhongliang came to visit me with a large box of instant noodles. Chuckling, he set it down. "A gift for you." I looked sidelong at it, annoyed. "Zhongliang, are you trying to murder your elders? There's got to be enough preservatives in here to turn me into a mummy." He laughed some more. "All right, tell me what you like to eat and I'll bring that instead." "Forget it," I said. "What do you want?" He scratched his head. "There's a family gathering at my uncle's house next week. I'd like you to come with me." "Why would you want me to come to a family gathering? Are you asking me to be your girlfriend?" He looked as if he'd just stepped on a landmine. "I wouldn't dare," he said, which meant you're too old for me. "My uncle likes your stories," he went on. "When he found out we were friends, he told me to invite you." Ah, a fan. No way. I never agreed to these sorts of requests. The boy had a trick up his sleeve, though. He brought his handsome face close to mine and said, "The professor might be there. Will you come?" "Sure," I blurted. Annoyed at having been so easily lured into revealing myself, I didn't say anything else, just shoved him out of my flat. "I'll pick you up at 6 next Friday," called Zhongliang as I closed the door on him. By the time Friday rolled around, I'd completely forgotten what I'd agreed to. I was lounging in front of the TV, eating ice cream in an oversized shirt, rumpled and unwashed. When Zhongliang knocked on the door and I opened it, we looked at each other in shock. "What the hell are you wearing?" we chorused. He was all dressed up in a proper suit, standing very straight with a solemn expression. "We'll be going to a funeral." I remembered then about the gathering, and without even stopping to apologize, rushed into my bedroom. 5 minutes later, I was back, having pulled on a pair of trousers and scraped my hair back into a ponytail. That was the best I could do. "Let's go," I said. Zhongliang stared at me with a strange expression for a full 3 seconds before his face twitched. "Fine." Half an hour later, Zhongliang's Fiat was pulling into the city's richest district, and I had an inkling that I was in trouble. He turned into the broad courtyard of his uncle's house, and I knew I'd been tricked. That's how I ended up sitting across from the city's most famous jeweler, Zhongren. His nails were perfectly manicured as he took my hand, his grip firm and powerful. "Hello," he said. I smiled foolishly, an empty smile. "Hello," I replied. Inwardly, I cursed Zhongliang 1,000 times. Why call this a gathering when I was meeting his uncle one-on-one? Like a fish laid out on a slab, I was there for my reader, Mr. Zhongren, to examine. Zhongliang sat in the window seat with a thick book in his hands, leaving us in the living room, facing each other like the two sides in a Cold War negotiation. "I like your stories," Zhongren said. "So kind of you." All I could do was repeat the lines I'd used thousands of times before. "I've read everything you've written about beasts," he said. You make it all sound so real. The beasts are more human than the humans, and the humans are beastlier than the beasts." I sipped my tea and smiled blankly. It's not really so clear-cut. We fell silent. The man across from me looked kindly, as if he were my big brother, and his features were a little like Zhongliang's, though there was a sort of awkwardness to him, which I would only have expected in a young person. He was staring straight at me, from my forehead to my chin, then back up. I felt goosebumps rising all over my skin. Finally, I said, "Mr. Zhong, I should really..." "Let's get married," he said, as if startled from a dream. He sounded sincere. I choked. The book fell from Zhongliang's hand and thudded to the ground. "Damn you. So you were eavesdropping." For some reason, that was the first thing to pop into my head.
Amazing.
Right. So Yen, I think we're supposed to talk about the book now.
Yeah. I just want to say it's always such a privilege to hear Jeremy doing any reading, because he trained as an actor, and then he could, it's like, and I am also glad I'm not supposed to do any reading after he did, because it would be demoralizing for me. So thank you for that reading, and thankfully I don't need to do another reading.
Yeah. So that passage seemed particularly appropriate for this topic. And I was wondering how much it was based on experience, probably exaggerated. But is there a way in which young women writers in China are seen as belonging to their fans or having certain obligations?
Yeah, I mean, because so I like, obviously I wouldn't say that is in any way related to my personal experience, but I think largely speaking, it is more likely for a woman, like even a woman writer, to be sort of to be viewed under the male gaze of the society, and then to be in this way objectified. And I think it's quite embarrassing actually for me to hear you like reading that thing, because like, again, I wrote that 15 years ago, and I can see like there's lots of it's almost like too vibrant, and but at the same time, I suppose a child always tells the truth. In this sense, the 15 years ago me, like the 21-year-old me, is like a child who just bluntly tells the truth. I think in a way it just really shows, like when and I feel particularly like when they were talking to each other, those two characters, and you can always say, I think it's almost like a very common phenomenon. Typically among like men in China would say, they just wanted to let you know about their opinions, and no matter how much trouble they have to get through to get their niece to come to your apartment and to make up this lie, to say this is a family gathering and get you into their place. And then he just wanted to tell you this opinion he has about something you did, actually. So I thought that was quite right on the nose in a sense. And also I was thinking, because like Jeremy has very kindly sent me an email that includes points we could potentially discuss this time. But then I thought, I was really thinking about like when I was writing that book and how it felt, because I think supposedly now, because I don't live in China, I haven't lived in China for really like 6-7 years now. So I feel like I'm more detached to it. But like I was trying to reimagine the scenario, like the sort of visceral experience of being a woman there. And I was just, when Li Juan was just talking, I feel bad that I didn't say anything about like, I feel really lucky that I'm doing the event again with Li Juan. So it was particularly, I think precisely how many, 5 years ago, me and Li Juan did a tour together, and in which a number of Chinese writers were taken on this like tour, visiting different universities in the States and, you know, promoting Chinese literature at large. And then there was me and Li Juan and a number of other writers, that male and female. But I remember this one scenario is that we were traveling that particular day from East Coast to West Coast. This was like a long day, a long journey. And in the end of it, we arrived at the hotel, everybody exhausted. And at this particular moment, one of the male member of a man in this group and just put his feet up and ordered another woman who's like a quite senior writer to say, now go make me a cup of instant noodle. And this is not a personal criticism towards anybody, but I think it really exemplifies how like we as like sort of a gendered groups were treated, were considered in that society at large. So I kind of feel this is a very like exactly kind of like a visceral experience of being a woman writer in China. Like in my case, because I lived in China, like I moved to Ireland when I was 30. So it's like my whole 20s. It's being a young woman in that society. And which means I think I'm very good at apologizing all the time, no matter if this is something I did or said wrong or not. It's like, I'm always ready to say, I'm sorry. And I think it's like this physical experience of being a woman. And then you have this societal experience of being a woman, like examples of like making me a cup of instant noodle, things like that, because it's like subconsciously, that's how you're treated. You're like a subgroup. But I think that's not really, that's not just China. I think it happens in lots of societies. But I think for a writer, most sort of relatedly and really deeply for a writer is that how the identity as a woman engages with you, like entangles with you, and on the linguistic and really ideological level. In a sense, I think like I do have this experience now when I'm like writing in different languages, and then you get to see the other language from the outside. And you do feel like how a language, like say my mother language, I'm sure it's the same in English or to a different degree, that this language is structured in this patriarchal structure. And then there are lots of things like, you know, included in the language itself that is related to the stigmatization of women, like of female bodies. For instance, we don't really talk about period. That's like taboo word. Or of female experiences, it's like we have certain words like to describe a certain situation that is almost exclusively attributed to a woman. Say in Chinese, we say 歇斯底里, hysteria. And it is almost like, it's always like a woman's thing. It's like, because we lose control of our emotions. I think all of those stigmatization in the language does, in a way, definitely, especially I think for women writer, when you are precisely trying to use this language, use the language as the channel to express your really, like what Li Juan was saying, I thought it was very moving. She said, you know, I don't think I'm particularly womanly, but I'm just expressing myself. I think that's exactly the point. Is like we use our individualism to sort of combat, right back to this sort of female stereotypes. But then in order to do that, in the way of doing it, you're precisely using this language that is deeply really soaked in this patriarchal structure. And then I think that's something I've been thinking about a lot these days. I think similarly, if we're talking about 异兽志, like Strange Beasts of China, it's like all the beasts were really like subcategory, like they were put into different categories. But in a way, to put anybody in a category, to put me in a category, to say I'm a woman writer rather than saying I'm a writer, is to put me into a subcategory. So all of those beasts were being subcategorized. And then what we do in the end, I think, is for them to like first realize they're being categorized. Is like this awareness of like, oh, we've been put into a cage. And then they fight back in the way like we write back. We write in the anti-stereotypical way. And we write to enrich, to sort of pronounce our individuality. But I think in the end, this is a bit of a spoiler. I think in the book, when we're really trying to, what we're really trying to do is to blur the boundaries of different categories, to say, are beasts really beasts? Are humans really human? And I think for me, this is my personal experience, I think, is to really like in the way to answer, to address to this subcategorization of this, if you put it more dramatically, it's like imprisonment of your identity, is to really enrich, to make your, to diverse your identity, to make it more complicated in the sense, if you are both a writer of A, B, C, D categories, and then it becomes very hard to generalize. So I think the way of, it's similarly, I think, in 异兽志, in Strange Beasts, it's like all the things, eventually the way out is to cancel it, is to cancel this categorization, and is to cancel this ostracization in turn. And I think that seems to be, is to have like, you know, like a multiplied and fluid identity. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Whenever I talk about serious things, I just get very serious. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing. Amazing.
Thank you.
Cool. I think at this point we'll really open the discussion to the floor. We thought we have, if you have any questions for the for any of the speakers, please put them in the chat now, and will be directed by Francis. So Francis, I think we have some pouring in already. So we have one question.
Okay, shall I take?
Yes, please.
Do you want to pass it on? Yeah,
yes, please.
Okay, thanks very much. Yes, if you've got any questions, do put them into the chat, and I'll try and select a sort of a proportionate number for each of our speakers. I may need to take some notes because the chat's disappearing quickly, and we're getting lots of questions coming through. The first question that I've had is to Li Juan, and the question is from the Anna Louise Stiegelbult, who's a translator of San Mao, the Taiwan author, San Mao into Dutch. And the question is, does Li Juan notice any comparisons, or has she ever been compared to San Mao in terms of the tradition of writing about with overlap of writing and traveling?
So Li 老师啊
Okay, there she is.
李娟老师啊
Daniel, go ahead.
这有一个为荷兰语的给三毛老师翻译的那个书的一个人问您说，您从来有没有人从来和您和三毛有比较？之后呢，那个之后完了以后is it in 您因为您也是写很多那个就是 travel writing， 就是旅行文学的这样的书，所以那个您有没有任何人跟您和三毛有比较？
特别多，特别多，
特别多，是吗？您能？She says there's quite a few. There's quite a few. 您能那个有没有一个您能记得住的一个这个样子？
书评
或者什么这样子的东西呢？
千篇一律吧。
都是那样的说有相似之处，但是我觉得我实际上我已经在非常刻意的避免这种相似了。我三毛的书的确是很有触动，但是我并不是，虽然觉得他很优秀很不错，但是我并不喜欢，不好意思。
哎，李娟，我能那个问李娟老师一个 follow up question 吗？好高兴看到你啊，好久没见。我想知道说你有没有那种，就是你可能比如说对三毛不太感兴趣，但是有没有那样的就是中文世界里面的作家，你是特别 aspired， 就是你特别喜欢的，或者你觉得他们有影响你的作品的，方便跟我们分享吗？
很多很多，这叫我怎么说呢？比如说，我很喜欢汪曾祺，他对我是一个很大的影响，尤其是少年时候，还有就是上初中时候读过的书，那个就是，哎呀，怎么我这一紧张就忘记了，就是写那个《铁木前传》的孙犁，对，而且我是影响的作者，并不是同样的风格，可能会风格相差非常的大，落差很大。就这样。
Well, I can serve as the standing translator. I think when me and Li Juan did the tour in the States, I was doing similar things. Like she was saying she was under influence of lots of good writers, and she particularly mentioned Wang Zhenqi. I don't really know how to reference, and then the other one is Sun Li. So those two writers, she thought she was under their influences, and she was particularly impressed by Sun Li's 铁木前传. Thanks for whoever typed it up.
Oh yeah, that's great. I mean, I think the big difference between, to go back to the Sanmao comparison, and I kind of understand Li Juan not really being in favor of the Sanmao comparison, is that Sanmao's writings are primarily travel literature, and Li Juan's are not. It's not travel literature. This is her lived reality, that this is where she lives, this is where she grew up. So she's writing about home. I mean, writers are oftentimes, when you go to literature classes, right, they tell you to write what you know, and that's very much what Li Juan does. So it's different than Sanmao's work, because Sanmao was writing about these, foreign countries and so on. So I can understand the kind of not really being happy with the comparison. I mean, I guess there are elements that are similar, but it's two different genres for writing, I think.
Now it shows who is the teacher, who is the professor.
Sorry.
Very good. That is a great summary.
It also goes to something though about, I mean, the question of trying to put labels on writers, right? And trying to put, okay, this is a writer of this and this is a writer of that. And then you have to have a label to find these comparisons and so on. And for me, Li Juan's work kind of resists labels, and that's what makes it really interesting.
Absolutely.
That's why I enjoy it so much.
Totally agree. Absolutely, yes. Next one.
Next one. Do you have a next one question in mind, Francis?
Yeah, I mean, I think just following on what Chris says, and I'm just sort of scanning the comments box here, and it's interesting that we have people on both sides here. Some people saying, yes, they're fans of Sanmao, but they don't see any connection between Li Juan's work and Sanmao's work. And other people saying, yes, it really reminds me of Sanmao as well. And I think that's the point here, really, that any questions about influences of authors are so personal and so subjective that's one of the things that makes it, I think, such a fascinating topic. And it's something about reading, why reading literature and which is perhaps new to us from a different type of context, can be so inspiring because it makes these connections in our minds, and each reader has their own experience and each is equally valid. So I think it's great. The next question that I've got here from Sweke, which is a question to Jenke, and it might be putting you on the spot somewhat. So if it's the sort of question that you want to get back to us later, Jenke, that's absolutely fine. But it was a question about the patriarchal nature of the Chinese language, and it was, could you give any examples of how you feel that the Chinese language is structured in a patriarchal way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm obviously no expert in, like, I couldn't really give, like, I think I recently started thinking about this question. I was talking with a group of friends who write both in Chinese and in English, and this group of friends, a majority were like women, and we were all saying that we feel it seems to be freer to express like female experiences, to write like a woman's story, and without being even like inner judging yourself. But I don't think it's necessarily a problem with like Chinese language versus English language. I think in my experience, this is more of a like my native language, which would have a more, you know, like an intrinsic connection with myself that really stimulates like my inner stigmas. And it's like based, you know, your native language determines how your thinking process, how you are structured as a psychological being. So I think it has a lot to do with that, with the way I'm connected with Chinese language. I'm not saying similar issues are not happening in the English language, but it obviously, because I have this, like the outsider's distance towards the second language. So I don't really feel those things as strongly as I would have in Chinese, which really gives me a nice getaway to express things without like, you know, feeling about them like too viscerally, which would also be something that is not necessarily like advantage. But like, for instance, if we were talking about, I might have been talking about this with Jeremy. I was just ranting about this to say, like in Chinese language, you quite often get those, like if you say like jian, like jianzha, somebody being like very cunning and calculating. And all those adjectives and indicating bad things were always with a woman radical, like 女字旁. and then this is just like a very small, and for instance, when I was just saying, like if you say 歇斯底里 or those type of things, and it's always associated. And it might have been the same in English. So, well, obviously, because by and large, all the societies, not all, the majority of the societies we know of were like predominantly patriarchal societies. So I think it really reflects in different languages, in all the languages. It's not like typically a Chinese thing, but I think being an East Asian country, we have definitely have like, you know, much more sort of affected as sort of, I don't really know, like this is some kind of an expertise that I don't really have. But I think the way and the society looked down on women, or to really like shame women into self-shaming, I think it is really problematic, and it is quite pronounced in the way like how languages, how Chinese language in particular were used as weapons to attack like this kind of a female experience, and especially when being expressed explicitly and in a sort of a public sphere, and then somehow that is always being sort of questioned upon. And to say, well, this is a private experience, but why it is private? Because it's related to a female body. And why do we not think like, you know, experiences relating to male experience were not private? So I think this is just a very small point. I mean, I'm not, again, speaking from any kind of expert point of view. It's just really just my personal thinking recently, really.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One other question. Li Jian, you mentioned about the environment and the importance of the environment and the influence of the environment on your writing. This is really a question for both Li Jian and for Jenke. That is, when you are apart from the environment you are writing in. So Li Juan, you're in Hainan just now. Younger, you're in Norwich just now. When you are away from the environment about which you are writing, does that make it very difficult for you to write? Does it influence the way you are writing, or are you still able to write when you are remote from the place in which you are writing?
Shall I translate that or?
Yeah, go for it.
Great. So 李老师啊，那个有个人问您一个问题，就是您和您一般写作的environment
就在那个
一般写作的地区的时候，那个环境的时候，您觉得写作更难吗？还是有什么跟您一般写作的不一样的地方吗？
还有，如果现在您要是不在那个环境以后，您的写作和那个时候的写作有什么区别？没有，开着。李老师，您听得见我吗？我们听不见你。
可以听见，我还在想怎么回答。
他们这个问题实际上是问2个人的，要不然让那个严歌老师先回答。
李娟，你要说吗？你先说吧，或者你想再想一会儿，我可以先说。啊？
你说吧。
那你先想会儿，我先说。This really reminded me of our tour of our lovely US tour like about 5 years ago, and it's kind of like, yeah. Well, I think. Well, what was the question? Sorry. About. Oh yeah. Now I do think it's a massive problem. I think. But it really say I always encourage myself when I first moved away from China, when I first lived in Dublin. At that point, I was still kind of only writing in Chinese, and they had become like a very massive challenge to me in a very practical sense, that I live my everyday life in and out in English, but then I need to write this story about, taking place in this rural town in Sichuan where everybody speaks not just Mandarin but Sichuanese, and it's really hard. I remember I was like sitting in my sitting room and in Dublin, and somebody was playing on the street, and you hear like people talking, and then you're like really trying to sort of start your engine of Sichuanese and like transform yourself back to that fictional world where everybody speaks Sichuanhua, and it has become like a more, and I think it works in 2 ways. And firstly, I think it emotionally actually propels your writing, like you have this insurmountable distance that actually helps you to feel kind of more intensely about the objects of your writing, because you literally couldn't get there. And I think this very like sort of a famous sensation of nostalgia can work in the favor of the writer who writes from elsewhere. But I think on a very practical and maybe sometimes even like linguistic level, it has become, like in my own experience, more and more difficult for me to engage with my Sichuanhua world. And I think that is probably one of the reasons why a few years later, I eventually decided to sort of add English to my literary language and to start to write in English, which is to make like a literary connection with the world around me. I think that seems at that point was the only method I could think of to make sense of my complicated situation, and then to anchor myself into the world I live in and to make that connected with my literary world, which to me really, I began to write when I was a teenager. And, like writing is the only thing I know how to do. It's the only way that I can exist. So it's like really dramatic. So I think for me, that becomes kind of like compulsory, that I have to make sense of this setting via writing. And then I think that seems to be one of the main reasons that I had to introduce English to my literary language. So yeah, it's really, I want to hear what Li Juan thinks about it. 好了，我说完了，李娟你说吧。
哎呀，我明白他的意思，因为我的写作，我的好几部比较重要的作品，它是在别人看来是体验式的写作， 就是书写生活本身的。
马上接着。
他就想问可能是就想了解我是在生活之中写呢，还是脱离生活写，是什么样的不同？实际上对我来说，写作它是一件很艰难的事情，因此我写作的时候可能会对我来说很重要的一点就是保持冷静，这个是我需要脱离。所以我的很多书都是因为我的文字到目前为止写都是我个人的，与我个人有关的一些文字。我在每一本书在写他们的时候，实际上都是脱离这段生活很多年了。像东部场稍微近一点，可能脱离了可能有个1年吧。然后杨道有3、4年。还包括我的阿尔泰系列，都是很多年以后，在回忆中写成的。我不知道别人是怎么处理的这种关系，我一定要脱离了，然后有一段完整的写作时间，然后慢慢的整理，慢慢的写。比较混乱，大致就是这样的。
She was saying people were asking this question, were wondering if she was asked this question a lot because people think she writes directly from her personal experience. So whether by being removed from that experience would affect her writing. And she was saying she actually precisely needs to be removed from that experience to have that. I think Li Juan was saying like the temporal distance rather than geographic distance, but maybe those two are related. And then she needs that space for her to sort of decompose, to reorganize her experience and to let them sort of like simmer and ferment, maybe. I'm like elaborating now, she didn't really say that, but the point was like that.
I think we all understand what she tried to say, but it's really difficult to put everything in good order in English.
Cool.
Okay, I think our time is running quite short, but we've got one final question here for Yenke, which is your experience as a bilingual writer, and which language do you feel more effective and forceful in expressing yourselves in writing, in Chinese or in English?
Oh my me. It is a very good question, actually, and because I ask myself that a lot. And I think what happened is that this is just a provisional answer, okay? Nothing is final. I think what happened is that, well, I'm sure lots of people, especially the translators, and I think a lot of people here in this group are bilingual. You do feel like you have a different personality, you have a different persona when you're in a different language. Like, I think another language enables like different parts of you. I think it might have been Frederick Jameson who said different languages are like different lenses. Through a different pair of lenses, we see different things of this world. So it's like the dead corner of, say, Chinese could possibly be seen by English and vice versa. So I think in that sense, language not only serves as a way of us looking into the world, but also serves as a way of us organizing ourselves, like, you know, to think through the language. So I would suggest, I don't really know if that's the truth, that I actually have 2 different writer's identity when I write in Chinese and when I write in English. I think sort of on a very practical level, I do have different materials that I know very clearly that this is a story that I have to write in Chinese. And those are the stories that has to take place in English. So I kind of feel it's like a split of writer's identity rather than 2 language fighting over, you know, the same chunk of materials. So I don't really, I think there were like particular things that would be better said in English, and there were like other things that would be better said in Chinese. So yeah, that probably also reflects in my writing as well. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
I think there's way more questions than there are time to answer them. So what we'll probably do after this event is kind of compile a list of the kind of most commonly asked questions, and then we'll pass it to the relevant speakers to answer. And then we'll send it out as a massive email blast afterwards with relevant translations.
You're the best organizer, Daniel. I have to say, I'm so impressed.
You're not seeing the masking tape holding it all together. Cool. So I think where the event is scheduled. So yeah,
it looks like.
I think it's been a very fantastic event, and thank you all for joining us. And I think the chat will definitely be saved afterwards, so we'll get an email. But just in case you're not sure if your event question got through, just email this email. I'll just type it in right now at AlanCharlesAsia.com. And then yeah, send an email to that, and then we'll make sure the questions get on. But thank you very much for joining us. I believe Strange Beasts of China right now, TAP's already brought that out last year, I believe. So that's available to buy through their website on the link on the Eventbrite. And then the Distant Sunflower Fields will be coming out on the 12th of next week, I believe. And they'll be available through Impress's website, which is our distributor. And we'd like to say that we will be able to offer an exclusive postcard that we put together, which you can send to your friends. When was the last time you received a postcard, huh? And which will be part of exclusively to the pre-order process of this event only. So if you want to grab that postcard, make your way to the Impress website now. And thank you. What's a postcard? Thanks, Christopher. It's these pieces of paper, you push them through mailboxes, it's great. And
this, I'm very proud of this cover design. And you can see from here, it's all handmade. Can you see it? Can you see it? So this is all handmade of sunflower. And see how fine this is inside. Can you see here? It's all hand, it takes weeks. Of quite few ladies and boys and put this together.
You'll see it going across our socials. You'll see it going across our socials of how this was made over the next few weeks or so. So keep an eye out for that.
The best hair winner gets a sunflower. Maybe we should send a sunflower
Exactly.
to Jeremy.
And also we have asked Li Jian Laoshi has signed few personal copies already. And it's on the way back, it's waiting in her flat in Hainan. And so as soon as we get it back, we will, you can asking for signed copies.
Which will be exciting.
It will be exciting, yes. But I don't know how long it will take to get here because at the moment, all shipment from China has been delayed.
Yes,
and
extraordinarily so.
And also it's Chinese New Year comes, and there will be further delay. But keep our fingers crossed, it will come.
Touch wood. Touch wood. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us this evening,
yes.
And hopefully we'll see you again at another one of these very soon.
Yes, and also on the 27th, we have another one for this book. It's and that
it'll go out across our socials. So keep an eye out for that.
Thank you.
But thank you all. Thank you very much.
Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you.
李老师啊，谢谢您啊。
谢谢杨格老师，谢谢李娟老师。
是吧？